Hi, everyone. Welcome to Doing Sociology. Today we have a very, very interesting book to discuss, which is titled Practicing Interdisciplinarity, Convergences and Contestations, which is edited by Babu P. Remesh and Ratheesh Kumar, and which was published by Routledge in 2024. So we have the editors of the book with us today. Very happy to have you both on Doing Sociology. I will begin by introducing our speakers a little bit. Babu P. Ramesh is currently a professor at the School of Development Studies, Dean Research and Development, and Director of the Center for Research Methods at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University, Delhi. Previously, he worked as an associate fellow at V.V. Giri National Labour Institute, Noida, and as associate professor and director at the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies at the Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Ratheesh Kumar currently works as an associate professor at the Center for the Study of Social Systems, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India. He has previously taught at the Department of Anthropology, University of Hyderabad, and at the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. He was a Charles Wallace India Trust Visiting Fellow at the Center for Research in Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities at the University of Cambridge from 2021 to 2022. Again, a very warm welcome to both of you. To sort of kickstart this conversation, could you talk about the context in which the book was written and its significance?
Yeah. So shall I start, Ratheesh?
Yeah. First of all, thanks to Doing Sociology. Thanks to you both, Rituparna and Dipali, for having us here. Yeah, I think, Babu, you can go ahead.
Yeah. And thanks, Dipali, for the generous introduction. I just want to add one more additional point that currently I am on sabbatical for a year. And whatever you explained is true at the time of our final submission of the final manuscript to the Routledge. This is a good opportunity to introduce our book. So as you have asked, we will first start with what is the context of this book and what why we thought that this kind of a book is required. Probably if suppose I leave something, then Ratheesh will pitch in. That is the kind of, or whenever Ratheesh gives certain kind of thing, I can also supplement. There is a famous quote called, the world has problems, but the universities have departments. And this is a quote from Gary Brewer about interdisciplinarity. And we can see that there are lots of instances where researchers who are really interested in the pursuit of knowledge, they confront with situations where a unidisciplinary approach or their own parental disciplines solo approach may not be allowing them to understand the problem like that they are considering. For instance, being a researcher on labor studies, I myself found it very difficult to understand labor in its totality with the pure lens of economics only. So that prompted many of us to find out ways and means to understand our problem in a better way. So along with our disciplinary standing and disciplinary approaches, we have also opened windows to other disciplines, and we also accepted ideas and tools and perspectives from other disciplines, which gradually shaped our interdisciplinary path. So you can see that there are many instances where scholars, not only in labor studies, in many other interdisciplinary areas, like for instance, if it is gender studies or women studies or media studies or conflict or water management, there are urban studies. You can see lots of instances where people who are interested in pursuit of knowledge in a holistic way, they often find that they need the help of other disciplines also, or the ideas, tools, and certain kind of insights from other disciplines can also provide them lots of anchorage. So this kind of a realization probably helped us to think in a detailed way. And probably like Ratheesh and myself, like we both were faculty members of a School of Interdisciplinary Studies at Indira Gandhi National Open University at some point of time. And by that time itself, we have had our own chosen ways of interdisciplinarity. Like I have been working with labor studies for many years, and Ratheesh was working on sociology of education. So from that time onwards also, and after leaving this interdisciplinary school from IGNOU and joining in our respective new jobs, like I joined Ambedkar University in Development Studies, and Ratheesh initially he moved to Hyderabad University, and now he is in JNU. So we can see that we realize that there are many people who are doing solo journeys in terms of their disciplinary understandings. But quite often these solo journeys are not documented. So we thought that it is very important to document the interdisciplinary journeys done by individual researchers and practitioners. And that will be a good opportunity for us to have lots of discussions around disciplinarity and interdisciplinarity in one place, and that will be really helpful for the students. So this is the realization, and probably during COVID 2020, when we had an opportunity to work together for a research methodology program, and when we had to deliver certain sessions on interdisciplinarity, we immediately thought that we should utilize this forced lockdown period as a suitable time for reaching out to various people who are working on interdisciplinarity, and probably request them to pen down their experiences. We got an overwhelming response from many researchers and practitioners, and though all of them could not contribute in this particular volume, we have around 22 researchers or practitioners who have been explaining their own interdisciplinary journeys. And we have people who have worked on emotions, we have people who have worked on translation, international relations, educational studies, women's work, media, disability studies, labor, so public health. So there are many areas in which like philosophy, sociology, how interdisciplinarity and sociology have been interacting. So all these essays, we believe that when it is brought together, it provides lots of information for those people who are really want to know what are the pleasure and pangs of interdisciplinarity, and to what extent they can use interdisciplinarity for their academic pursuit. And I'm going to stop here. Probably Ratheesh can add. We'll come back. I'll come back with more points after Ratheesh's interaction.
Yeah, thanks. A few points to add to this first question. One is that I would like to say what it is not. I mean, when we started thinking about this volume, we were very clear about a few factors that it should not be a prescriptive kind of a toolkit or a textbook which suggests that this is interdisciplinarity or this is interdisciplinary teaching and research, and this is not. So we didn't want to make that kind of a, what you call a rigid attempt to define what is interdisciplinarity and what is not. Rather, we thought of making it a kind of an open-ended debate that is told from different vantage points, scholars who took pathways which are different from the conventional ways of being in disciplinary paths. That is one. Second, it's also not a, we never wanted to make it a methodology, training, blueprint or a textbook. Like, it is not simply about methodology. It's also about, how theories, methods, concepts, institutional practices, research, the entire activities related to knowledge production and dissemination can be understood from these vantage points, which I mentioned already, come from both disciplinary and interdisciplinary paths. And the third point is that we attempted not to make it a book which confronts already existing disciplines. This is not really a book on anti-discipline. That's what also we were considering, that, it is like, tracing from Roland Barthes' way of thinking about interdisciplinarity. It is not about confronting the already constituted discipline. And it is also not about having a subject matter or a theme in which, on which, some more than one disciplines can be brought in for some sort of an anchorage. Rather, we wanted to understand how a new object, which is not yet explored by disciplines per se, can be looked at. Say, for example, my own parental disciplines, so-called parental disciplines like anthropology and sociology, could not look at certain areas as their mainstream topics or themes. So how those areas from my own interests can be brought in. Say, for example, how can one study sport and society, which was not really a field that sociology entered into very seriously. Sport was a discipline of physical education, for that matter. How sport and social formation can be studied. Say, for example, another dimension of studying food, how food can be understood from a sociological or anthropological point of view, and how something like sound, which I also study as part of my interest in sonic cultures, how sound is an interdisciplinary domain altogether. So these are some of the biographical and personal interests also drew me to think about interdisciplinarity, and that, like Babu already mentioned, our own trajectories of getting into disciplines. And for example, I studied economics for my undergraduation and then moved to anthropology for my post-graduation. Since I didn't get an admission in MPhil for anthropology, there are backup disciplines that these are interdisciplinary domains. All universities will have these kind of backups, and sometimes they work as rehabilitation centers, I call it. Kind of, then we have to move. I moved to a center called Center for Regional Studies. Normally, people won't choose these centers out of interest. Those who have not got admission in those conventional disciplines, we chose for that. So that's how, then I went to a department where the department is called Department of Humanities and Social Sciences for my PhD research in IIT. Then I also worked in a computer science department for a project that's on business incubation and entrepreneurship. And then, when I applied for a faculty position in IGNOU, this was my kind of, my resume actually suggests that, I was navigating through different other disciplines. So partly our biography, partly our interests, and how do we negotiate this with the already existing institutional structures and practices. These are points of what would I say, negotiations and certain contestations through which we started thinking about. And after all, after I joined School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, that's how this discussion started at that point of time, thinking about it, but it was concretized in 2020 during the COVID. We happened to attend a workshop, and from there onwards, we thought of scholars who also had similar trajectories in academics. Yeah, I think that's it and that's how this book came into being.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Ramesh and Dr. Kumar, for laying out the context of the book. And I think it's very pertinent that you say that you could talk about issues that were otherwise not, spoken about by these parental disciplines. And for our viewers' knowledge, we actually did a discussion on sociology of sports some time back, which is available on Doing Sociology. So you might check it out because Dr. Kumar mentioned, the relationship between sport and society. So let me ask you now, what interdisciplinary means in social sciences? I know you said that you didn't want to sort of strictly define it, but what would it mean and how important is it? I think you're muted, sir.
Yeah. Probably I'll start from a point where Ratheesh has stopped. We are not planning this book, or we haven't planned this book as a book which is against disciplines. Rather, like at least from our point of view, interdisciplinarity is something which goes along with disciplinary perspectives, because various disciplines are required to understand the reality. But we do believe that there are multiple meanings coexisting. So in order to understand these multiple meanings, sometimes we may have to come out of the that cocoon space of our own disciplines. And we have to think aloud, and we have to think out of the box also. So there are lots of kind of examples where we can see in order to explain how this interdisciplinarity, at least in our own way, how we conceptualized. For instance, if you see the metaphor of a banyan tree, you can see the main stem of the banyan tree can be considered as the parental discipline. But when the banyan tree grows up, gradually the prop roots will come. We'll realize that, like, for instance, if I come back to my own discipline, I can see that I got initial training in economics up to my PhD, and I was also into hardcore mathematical modeling and econometrics up to the level of MPhil and all. But when I worked with National Labour Institute at the time when I was completing my PhD, I was also a faculty member at National Labour Institute in Noida. That time, I started seriously thinking that because I got an opportunity to work with people from other areas who are also specializing on labor studies, I really understood that probably my parental discipline has certain kind of deficiencies, in the sense that probably caste or gender or class, many things are not considered while analyzing labor when we are using the typical neoclassical economics, which we are trained to use in our own parental discipline, maybe from that particular institution. So suddenly there is a realization that there are many more things that one has to understand in order to better understand your problem. So in that way, we can see that interdisciplinarity may be different from each person. Like my own interdisciplinarity or conceptualization of interdisciplinarity may be different from Ratheesh's way of conceptualizing interdisciplinarity, and that may be different from many other people. But whatever may be the degree of interdisciplinarity or the combination of disciplinary combinations that are going into that thing, interdisciplinarity, probably you can see that there is a gelling of two or more disciplines happening. The methodologies, perspectives, understandings, and many other and many other aspects of disciplinary thinkings are getting gelled together in this kind of interdisciplinary approach. For instance, we can see that if when you are working with one particular research problem, interdisciplinary approach provides you, or it enables you, or it gives you certain kind of opportunities or confidence to blend disciplines or the tools and techniques from various disciplines. And it's a kind of like we are not in a position to understand which discipline is actually like which are the ingredients that are gone into that particular approach. There are many interdisciplinary thinkers, for instance, like one about one interdisciplinary practitioner and who about his work I have given in a very detailed manner in my own article. That is the famous anthropologist or sociologist or even he can have wear many hats. There is a well-known researcher, Professor Jan Bremen, who has worked on Gujarat and like who has worked on India's laboring situation for many, many years. So we can see that Bremen's work have history in it, sociology in it, anthropology in it, gender studies in it, everything included. But at the same time, we may not be able to very clearly find out like where is history or where is sociology. And all the disciplines, all the scholars from all these disciplines, individual disciplines, they have lots of respect and regard to the approach of that particular person. So here we can see the interdisciplinarity, there is a blending happening, blending of disciplinary approaches, tools and techniques. And we will get a clear distinction when we are comparing, clear idea when we are comparing the concept of interdisciplinarity with the concept of multidisciplinarity. You can see that in many government committees or certain kind of delegations, we can see that there are people, there are experts from different disciplines coming together and collaborating and working on a particular thing. They will come together, work, and they will provide their inputs and they will go back. But while they are coming to a particular kind of a collaborative project, they are coming from the disciplinary background and they will go back to the same disciplinary background. But when interdisciplinary churning has happened, the interdisciplinary thinkers, they are not going back as the old person. They are transformed persons because they got some more insights. It's not that they lost whatever they have had with them from their parallel discipline, but at the same time they got many other ways of looking at the same thing, and which obviously provides them more holistic picture, and probably in that process a little bit waning of their own parental disciplines dominant presence. That also we can see. And I want to come to the other point that Ratheesh has pointed out about these rehabilitation centers or the kind of hierarchy that is existing in various educational institutions, where often interdisciplinary centers are considered as something like inferior spaces or something, and even those people who are trying to get into a job or research positions or teaching positions, they first aspire for, some of them, they aspire for getting into their parental disciplines. When they fail to get into their parental discipline, they will go to a center probably on an interdisciplinary topic and then still keep on working on with their parental discipline in a disciplinary way. So this is a kind of dilemma of interdisciplinarity, but obviously we can talk about it when we are talking about challenges and risks of interdisciplinarity at a later point of time.
Right.
Just to add a couple of points, if I can I.
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Yeah. One is that most things Babu now mentioned, it's in the context of doing research. I would take it a little backward in the sense that how one can think about the way in which we are taught from school to college to the university. So how disciplinarity is maintained, and then we started moving on to other sort of disciplines, interdisciplinary domains. I would like to state here that it's not that we do not want to define interdisciplinarity at all. We have actually made our ways of thinking about interdisciplinarity in the introduction chapter of the book. We didn't want to do a kind of a rigid definition of it, it's like, a kind of a closure that, nothing beyond this can be called as interdisciplinarity. That's why, individual paths and, biographizing how people traveled in different paths is also important. But at the same time, we also would like to say that it is not simply about, collaboration of different disciplines on a research project or a research task, rather than how institutional structures socialize us into discipline may not allow us to think beyond those borders. That's what, we, at least some 2 or 3 chapters are on border crossing, like Manisha Sethi's chapter on law, sociology and anthropology is about border crossing. Like, for example, there's a chapter by Soumya Dachama who talked about, translation. What kind of a discipline translation is, or translation belongs to what discipline? And then you'll find that, how a discipline called comparative literature emerged in Indian universities. Certain problems, questions, aspects of, teaching and learning are not really accommodated in English departments, in literature, and why there's a need for comparative literature. And that's how the questions and issues were not really welcome. They're not being taken up where there can be some spaces. So I actually would like to, mention this institutional structures and the organizing principles of these, institutions are also important when we look at how interdisciplinarity becomes an ethical question, some sort of a point of resistance through which, so that way, interdisciplinarity is also a question of political and ethical projects. So I just wanted to place it. It is not simply about, doing research or collaboration, but it's also offering us a window to think about, how teaching and learning took place in specific institutional settings when we think about disciplines. And also, when I just want to add on to this question of hierarchy, when we think about a discipline called sociology and anthropology, say, for example, not on research, while looking at theory, sociological theory, we have this, this is a platform on doing sociology. I thought of this example will make more sense. Like, for example, we have this classical thinkers called Marx, Durkheim, and Weber. And some of the classical thinkers list would add scholars like, Simmel or Pareto, and so on and so on. But when it comes to the modern or the advanced thinkers or theories, you will find a switch from sociological theory in the early 20th century or late 19th century. The 20th century second half, we witnessed something called social theory instead of sociological theory. And this is a kind of a move that we witness in interdisciplinarity, where we are not really simply thinking about scholars who taught at sociology departments per se, but we are also thinking about, certain scholarship can be part of not simply about sociological theory, but social theory. So in the field of theory, in the field of, conceptual formations, as well as in the field of doing research, these questions trigger. And that's what interdisciplinarity means beyond what we call the joining together of, 3 or more disciplines or 2 or more disciplines. That becomes, there is a tendency to collate everything like multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity. These are interchangeably used. I think probably Babu may respond to that in a more technical fashion. Yeah, that's it from my side on this.
Okay, so our next question is kind of related and probably it gives more opportunity for you to talk a little bit about it. What would be the differences between disciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, and interdisciplinarity? I think it's important to sort of also look at the clarifications of these terms.
It's
Actually, in our introductory chapter,
So you're muted. Your mic is
muted.
off. Yes.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, am I? Yeah. So in our introductory chapter, we have provided lots of discussion on these terms, especially like, it's kind of like if you are using the example or an analogy of a lens, unidisciplinarity is a single lens. It provides you a certain perspective from within the contours of a particular discipline. But when it comes to multidisciplinarity, so unidisciplinarity or single discipline provides, if economics or if it is geography or if it is sociology, in social sciences, various disciplines, each of the disciplines have its own ways of understanding or discussing, and it has special tools meant for aiding the approaches that is probably used in or normally used in that particular discipline. But when it comes to multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity are, many people they use it very interchangeably. If you even in university websites, most of the universities websites or even documents, we can see very confusing kind of discussions on these kind of wordings, because sometimes a particular program or course is explained as multidisciplinary in the same document, or at some point of some other web page there will be a discussion about interdisciplinarity. So usually like these are two words which are not given much serious attention, but the implications of these words are very, very different. In the case of multidisciplinary approach, you can see that there is presence of different disciplines together. For instance, if students are taught in a multidisciplinary way, probably there are teachers coming from different disciplines and teaching them certain things, and they'll be teaching their disciplines. And the students may be getting an access to, like, you are studying a particular program and you have an access to get the teachings or the learning exercises from an economist, from a sociologist, from an anthropologist. And but at the same time, imagine a classroom, for instance, in our development studies classroom or labor studies classroom, which we had in IGNOU. Like at AUD, we have development studies classroom. You can see that there are, like in our development studies classroom in Ambedkar University, I can see that there are students from different disciplines. They may be from engineering background, they may be from language background, there may be a BA in English or BA in Hindi, or some students are from like a BSc chemistry, and certain other people are from some economics or sociology or certain other social sciences disciplines. Teachers are also initially trained, got training from different disciplines, because the time when most of us we got trained, we were not having the presence of this interdisciplinary subjects. So mostly there are faculty members who are trained in public administration, political science, or geography, or anthropology, or economics. And when these students from diverse backgrounds and teachers from diverse backgrounds, they are working together for many, many months and days together, discussing various aspects of development studies or labor studies. Gradually, after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or 6 months, you will realize that all are speaking in same language, all are working with a kind of a orientation, which is a shared orientation, where their parental disciplines boundaries have got diluted, but at the same time they got lots of other tones in their approach, tones of various or shades of various other disciplinary approaches, but we cannot bifurcate or we cannot decompose it very easily. So probably in the case of multidisciplinarity, disciplines are coming together, they are working together, but they are disciplinary practitioners are coming and working together, but they are leaving. But in the case of interdisciplinarity, gradually while working together, they are getting transformed also. And there is a disciplinary churning happening, and the boundaries are getting blurred, and there is mixing, and gelling of disciplinary approaches and disciplinary tools and understandings are happening. You can see if I use a particular method of example for explaining multidisciplinarity, you can see the committee methods of government. That is normally it's a kind of multidisciplinary approach. Suppose if there is an agitation on a particular particular project, suppose you think that there is a dam project like Narmada project or something. Usually if there is a hue and cry and people are not very happy, governments will appoint a committee to study. And the committee may have an economist and an engineer, an anthropologist or an environmentalist. All of them will go and study various parts of various aspects of that particular issue, and then they will provide their inputs to the committee, and the committee will collate and present a report. That report may be comprehensive, but the contributors of that report, they will remain in their disciplines as they were earlier also, because they came for a particular purpose, collaborated, and they left. But in interdisciplinarity, there is no way back. Once you have got into the interdisciplinary path, means you are in the process of transformation. You will keep on changing. So we can see that the original discipline gradually disappears, but at the same time, there will be a new kind of discipline. Probably Ratheesh will give you a very interesting quote, which says that like each one's interdisciplinarity is different, and I keep on listening to that very beautiful quote from Ratheesh, and I also sometimes believe or tend to remember about that C. Wright Mill's understanding or explanation that every person is his or his own theoretician or whatever. So when we are doing interdisciplinarity, we are into our own way of developing our own way of doing. I haven't seen any two interdisciplinary practitioners who are having same way of practicing interdisciplinarity. That means interdisciplinarity, we cannot convert it as a discipline because it is not a discipline. Whereas you can see many economists with same kind of framework, or many sociologists who are having the same kinds of framework, because these are disciplines. But interdisciplinarity is something like a unique kind of understanding that you are developing, and probably you are the only custodian of that particular variety of interdisciplinarity. That's why documenting these things for the posterity and for the researchers who are coming in the same interdisciplinary or in their own interdisciplinary path, we have to record it and keep it, so that it will provide them certain kind of, at least they will realize that certain kinds of confusions were pre-existing. Many other people have also gone through these confusions. It is nothing wrong to have these kinds of confusion. So that is what I think, probably I hope that I could provide you some answers for your question. What is the difference between multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity?
Right. Thank you, sir. Actually, I just wanted to mention that you very, beautifully sort of highlighted the differences between the three terms, particularly now, with the NEP also, where there is a lot of focus on multidisciplinarity and, terms like interdisciplinarity, which are used. I'm sure, students, teachers, all of us come through, are put into different programs and, are sort of pushed to work on multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary subjects. So, it's interesting to listen to that. To sort of, this brings us to the next question, which we have for you, which is about, the disciplinary crisis in the 90s, which occurred in the social sciences. Can the debates which happened back then, can they be revisited today?
Yeah, I think this is a very crucial question that are we discussing the same problems of crisis that we had, in social sciences, which was discussed somewhere around the 90s and early 2000s. specifically mentioning about, sociology as a discipline. The crisis debate was there in different other disciplines. I remember in English, there was a group of, students and teachers were thinking about the crisis in English studies. That's how, English studies also provided this, what you call introduction of new disciplines such as, comparative literature on the one hand, looking at the vernacular question. Also, cultural studies stem out English departments basically. So they, in the beginning, they are mostly come from the humanities fold, whereas you won't find that kind of a crisis in social sciences giving rise to new interdisciplinary domains. But you will also find certain policy changes that brought into questions of how interdisciplinary domains can be brought in. One of those examples of this is taking up the question of social justice and transformative politics, in which you will find new schools or centers and departments like inclusion studies, or social exclusion and inclusive policies. So these are part of policy discussions and on the question of social justice in the social sciences. But I would like to take this question back to the 90s debate within sociology. For example, Veena Das wrote an article in the Economic and Political Weekly about the crisis in sociology in India, which had responses from Anand Giri and Satish Deshpande and a few others. You will find the problems that they were discussing. Veena Das was talking about the university structures, UGC reforms in UGCs, and also the participation of teachers and students taking up questions and issues which are relevant to that particular time period. When 90s also became a watershed of discussing about issues related to globalization, liberalization, and also certain political crisis and new formations of religiosity, community identity, post Mandal and Masjid kind of a context. What kind of a social science research, of what kind of a social science teaching is desirable for a society like in India, a country like India. So that context of crisis also talks about how there is a decline in academic commitment from the practitioners. That was responded by, say, for example, there's a response by Deshpande to Veena Das' article. Some of the questions that Veena Das raised was not really pertinent only to sociology, but it's also, relevant to other disciplines as well. So are we talking only about sociology as a discipline, or these are the crisis generic to social science and humanities in India? And way back, we take this further in 2010, 11, George Varghese, he was one of the contributors of our volume. He wrote an article, very interesting article about reimagining social sciences and humanities in the 21st century. So in which, there's a general narrative of crisis from the late 80s and 90s onwards to the last 2 decades. We are witnessing what kind of social sciences are desirable in India. I mean, then you will find issues related to policy and practice, and also that's what reflected in the new education policy as well. Something related to what is there as part of what we call the market demand. What is there? I mean, knowledge should be reconstructed or refurbished according to the demands of the market. I'm not really saying this. This is how it has been imagined in the contemporary times, that what kind of social science should be. There is a process of customization, and I'm not really talking in favor of this. That's why we will find there are a lot of developments related to the new reforms, including today's newspaper. I found that what is the qualification for a research degree like PhD in India now. And you can also see that how the annual performance indexes, quantification of knowledge, the decline of slow thinking, and there's an overall rush to replicate what is happening in the global context about this global ranking. These are all ways of quantifying knowledge production and dissemination. So in that way, that's the larger context. We need to think about how the problems that was the points of discussion in the 1990s about the crisis narrative. What are the new problems? Are we discussing the same old problems of the academic commitment, the academic rigor in teaching and research? And now are we talking about the same old issues, or the new issues have arrived to further think and debate over that? And this is relevant to compare what was there in the 90s as part of this crisis narrative and what is the new narratives of crisis. I mean, this is a very interesting topic for someone to write a very detailed article or even a small monograph on this. Yeah, I would leave at this point. I mean, these are some of the layers of this issue that can be worked out further.
Can I just add one point before we are going to the next aspect? It's good that like you are talking about NEP and the utility of this kind of a work. But, we have to admit that when we have designed or thought book and worked on this book, probably like we haven't thought about NEP or related discussions. NEP related discussions surfaced probably once we have conceptualized and most of our work was over, or it has already taken a shape. So we are happy that like by the time the book has come, there is discussion on multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity, especially in the context of NEP. And this is the probably like the book has a kind of a good opportunity that lots of people are interested in these terms, like understanding interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity. But at the same time, as we have explained, this interest or the genesis of this book it goes back to around 15 years before. And from that time onwards, we have been thinking about all these things. Probably that time NEP document and all these concerns came recently only. But obviously, like this book will also provide lots of insights to understand or probably analyze the NEP document in a kind of with the kind of academic discussions or insights that we are providing in this book. I'm sure that that will provide lots of insights for a reader to understand and NEP related discussions on disciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, and interdisciplinarity.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yes, just to add to the point that you're making, that because sometimes these terms are just sort of either thrown at people or they just pick it up without actually understanding. So even if this book was not written keeping in mind taking into account the NEP or written much before that, I think it has come at a very right time, I would say. So to sort of just again taking forward this conversation, we'd like to know, how do the global restructuring of disciplines and the increasing demand for interdisciplinarity get reflected in the reconfiguring of knowledge domains in Indian higher education?
I think before I say something related to that, I would like to mention two chapters specifically in the book. That is by George Verghese and Shiju Sam Verghese. These two chapters talk about the historicity of disciplinary pathways in universities across the world and how these transitions can be accounted along with the questions related to political and ideological issues. And that way, when we talk about the global university structures at this point, I mean, Varghese, in his Economic and Political Weekly article published in 2011 on rethinking social sciences and humanities for the 21st century, clearly mentioned, there's this transition one can actually observe. This is also seen in the newly emerged universities, especially the private universities. I'll respond to it maybe later. Earlier, we will find this kind of a earlier tripartite kind of a classification where you have natural sciences, schools of natural sciences, in which you will find life sciences, biology, physics, chemistry, mathematics. Then you have this humanities where philosophy, theology, literature, linguistics, so on and so forth. And then the social sciences, in which you will find these social science disciplines like economics, political science, anthropology, history, sociology, kind of. But now when you look at the university structures, you go to websites, you will find, interestingly, that these structure has been changed, and you will find disciplines are classified in some sort of an alphabetic order, rather than dividing them into typical this tripartite ways of looking at humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences. This is also reflected in when new disciplines or interdisciplinary domains are introduced in universities in India. Say, for example, you will find, interestingly, philosophy department is located, I mean, in JNU in social sciences. And I'm not really sure, how logically we'll get back to what is happening in other universities across the globe in the past, how that can be logically derived, why philosophy is in social sciences. You will also find in University of Hyderabad, economics has become a new school. So economics says that, we are not really part of the social sciences anymore. We are a separate school. So economics left the social sciences stream, saying that we are a different school. So you will find that there is a kind of a standalone approach. Certain disciplines are taking, and certain other disciplines are accommodated in some other fields which are not really supposed to be part of their field. And you will also find, nomenclatures are also changing. Like in JNU English, you will find again, not English, language, literature, and cultural study. It is not cultural studies, it is culture studies. And how nomenclatures are also shifting from the ways in which they are known at some point of time. This is also part of, I would say, that the restructuring that is taking place in the United States, Europe, and other universities in the world. And there's also sort of a reflection that you will find in the newly emerging universities, institutions, and the departments. Also, this all started with the area studies, introduction of area studies in the US. And then later, the programs such as communication studies, post-colonial studies, women's studies, these are 1960s and 70s onwards. But now we take it to the 21st century, you will find this, that's what I mentioned, the alphabetic order of disciplines. And we'll find starting from A to Z, you will find interesting disciplines which are not really conventional disciplines, but new nomenclatures. And what they include, what they contain, and what they do not contain is an interesting question to ask. Say, for example, in Ambedkar University, maybe Babu will be able to tell you, what are the names of the departments in schools, which are totally different from, and where do they borrow these ideas? So now you can actually see that, there is some sort of a response. This is also a response, I would say, that since MOUs are taking place across nation states where universities are, now there is this new UGC's guidelines that foreign universities will be starting their campuses in India. So there is a lot of exchange programs are taking place already. And there is also some sort of a convergence that the space can be shared by universities across the globe. And for that matter, you need some sort of a uniform restructuring. So probably, yeah, I mean, this is the way in which one needs to look at, how this is part of, how when education becomes a kind of a lucrative market, you will also think about, how uniformity can be brought in. It is something like what we can understand what is global market and the global commodities for that matter. I'm not really, making it a kind of a simple derivation that, education has totally become a commodity, but at least it is assumed to be a commodity. So that's how this global restructuring having its own reverberations in the Indian context.
What would liberal arts mean in this context? Because that's again something where we talk about interdisciplinarity.
Yeah, quickly to respond to that. I mean, liberal arts is actually derived from the West. I mean, derived in the sense that liberal arts was part of what you call how education was conceived, maybe, before the, I mean, the classical times, where they say, for example, when you think about a scholar like Aristotle, which discipline Aristotle will fall into? Aristotle is a scholar of all streams. And from that, classical ways in which we understand philosophy, natural sciences, and social sciences, I think George's article mentions this with the most clarity, and how this was later gone into the making of, classification of disciplines in the modern era, tracing it from, Foucault's order of things to the post-Enlightenment way of understanding disciplines within universities, where you have, found this, tripartite divisions between humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences. I'm not really going into the details of that, but there is this push for liberal arts, which doesn't confine to only humanities and social sciences. Liberal arts suggests a truly interdisciplinary ways in which, you can connect to mathematics, you can connect to, astronomy, music, and then logic, philosophy, fine arts. So it is a kind of an academic spirit in which interdisciplinarity is well accommodated in the past. And when it was newly oriented towards the liberal arts departments in India, and there's a very interesting article on this specific topic by Shubha Ranganathan. She talked about liberal arts in IITs. Now, IITs now introduced liberal arts, I think, somewhat equivalent to the humanities and social science departments they already have. I mean, these are new IITs like IIT Hyderabad and other IITs. In fact, there's this, humanities and social science departments were already there in all the IITs from its inception. I mean, late 1950s onwards, you will find that humanities and social sciences were taught. But now in 2000 onwards, you will find there's a new discipline which was introduced in IITs as part of HSS department. That is, I think the terminology differs in different IITs, something called the Indian sciences, Vedic sciences. So when you talk about Indian sciences, this is not really part of social sciences per se. This is, Indian science is also a version of, or a different version of, an alternative version of the Western science, for example. So how will you accommodate something called the Indian sciences in humanities and social sciences? So that way, it is I mean, I would say this is the way in which I would like to understand. This is relying on the past way of understanding liberal arts from the Western context to bring it back to the Indian institutions like IITs, for example. I mean, liberal arts is also part of Ambedkar University. Probably Babu will be able to reflect on that. And also newly introduced private universities, you will find this liberal arts undergrad programs in liberal arts. And that way, conceptualizing or, conceiving liberal arts in the Indian context is totally different from the liberal arts what happened in the past. So that, we need to look at very specifically region wise or the nation wise specifically how liberal arts is understood, it is conceived, and when it comes to practice, what actually liberal arts means to the Indian institution, especially universities and like I told about IITs. So this is a very critical question. Now you'll find, several private universities are having liberal arts undergrad programs. So what does what do they contain in their pedagogy, teaching materials, doing research? Now undergrads also, why I'm saying, there's a research component included in that, like the 4-year undergrad programs. There's also a component of research project. And once you complete that liberal arts, you can move to any discipline. So you will find a kind of a total restructuring is happening in the name of liberal arts. And we need to look at it. I think Shubha Ranganathan's article and George Varghese' chapter in this volume will be throwing some light on this debate altogether.
Actually, I also agree with Ratheesh's observation that the best way of coming to this particular point is to go through Shubha's article on liberal arts in IITs, because it has lots of discussion about how liberal arts is understood in Indian context and how it is different from Western context and all. And, I want to take it back to the certain points raised by Ratheesh, because, there is not only liberal arts, even many terms like, for instance, humanities, how humanities is understood differently by different institutions. Like the composition of humanities in IGNOU may not be the composition of humanities in other university. So it's like whether English is part of humanities and social sciences, certain universities will have certain answers and the other university may not be having that particular kind of answer. And these are all certain kind of confusions, and especially in the case of interdisciplinarity also. For instance, whether it is a right thing or wrong thing, I am not the person to comment. But when probably like Indira Gandhi National Open University started interdisciplinary school, of course, like we got a position there and we were working there. There were lots of discussions within the university and from outside the university that whether there is a requirement of a particular specifically dedicated school on interdisciplinary studies is required or not. Many took a view that like IGNOU or many other universities in India, say JNU, they had elements of interdisciplinarity pre-existing also. Like what is the requirement of this kind of a school? That was a major debate. Of course, like since we are not the persons who conceived this and instituted these schools, we don't have to take honors of this particular thing, and we don't have to defend and all. But within IGNOU, I remember that like there were lots of discussions about like we have an interdisciplinary school in one place and we have gender studies in another school, or we have certain interdisciplinary topics in other schools. So within universities also you can see conflicting kind of arrangements. If suppose you have an interdisciplinary school, it should be a all-encompassing kind of a school which can accommodate many schools. Like a school which is working on gender studies can very well go within interdisciplinary studies. So we can see that most of these superstructures or governance structures are imposed on academic thinking and academic practices, according to certain kind of conceptualization that existed at certain point of time in universities. There are certain artificial like superstructures or designs which are imposed on what is happening on the ground. And you can see that there are lots of like fluidity. There are lots of interconnections, which happens even when there are bifurcations, which are these kinds of, we may call it as a school of economics or faculty of economics, and we may call it as faculty of geography. But probably in the Department of Geography and Department of Economics, there may be sometimes PhDs happening, which are with same kind of focus and same kind of approaches. And we can see that to some extent, university spaces also provide certain kind of flexibilities also. at least one flexibility which I can see, that most of at the evaluation level, no universities are keeping a kind of a they are not insisting on the evaluators like discipline. They will only see that, okay, if one thesis is being sent to Babu Ramesh, they'll see that, okay, it is on labor studies, let it go to Babu Ramesh. It can come from a sociology or anthropology, or from geography, or from many other disciplines, management. Okay, the thing is that the specialization of the evaluator is taken into consideration. But that kind of a flexibility is not often coming in terms of appointing faculty members. Recently in a debate in JNU, I came to know that like way back, long back, also like JNU had the tradition of appointing a person from other discipline in sociology faculty, or for instance, a sociologist is being appointed in economics. This is a kind of a like desirable practice, but to what extent these kind of desirable practices are happening in Indian universities, we have to see. Many a times, there are lots of disciplinary watertight compartments happening, and it prevents this osmosis, like the change of ideas, and it comes as a kind of a hurdle for free flow of knowledge and free flow, like many disciplinary oriented faculty members and students, they don't even dare to step out of their disciplinary backgrounds. Even in my case, I have explained that like I had to add more economics into my thesis to substantiate that I am earning a degree in economics from JNU. Because in the initial study which I have conducted, it was having less economics and more interdisciplinary things. So probably one way of, the best way of, at least in my way of understanding interdisciplinarity, is that interdisciplinarity can be there along with the disciplinarity in all disciplinary like spaces. Because there can be sociology, strong sociology department where people can also be interdisciplinary. And there can be geography departments where people are also into interdisciplinary thinking. So if that kind of understanding comes, we can see that most of the disciplines, they will open small windows towards other disciplines, which allows new ideas and new exchange of like knowledge happening without even losing track of what is happening in their parental disciplines. Now the thing is that there is an article written by Becker called Academic Tribes and Territories, and where it is explained that like when someone is getting converted into interdisciplinary stream, their own parental discipline will first come with punitive actions like expulsion. Like these people are not having the academic rigor, they are very soft, they are not the kind of people. So it's a kind of like othering the person who have changed from the accepted norm of the discipline. So these kind of tensions probably it's very important to notice that like we have to probably like if this book can generate certain kind of discussions where people can be more accommodative and they don't have to shift their spaces, they don't have to move from their this means they can be there wherever they are, but at the same time they can have an interdisciplinary orientation. So at least that kind of an understanding, if this book can provide, we'll be really happy.
Thank you for that response. You talked about the IITs and interdisciplinarity there. We do know that there are a number of private universities which offer courses in humanities and social sciences, and these are most of them are interdisciplinary centers. So this brings us to the question about the role that private universities play in practicing interdisciplinarities in humanities and social sciences. What do you, how would you look at that?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, now if you randomly look at private university websites, you won't find in many university websites they are providing schools or centers. Instead, you will find programs. I think rarely you will find, for example, Shivnadar University, you will find schools and centers, departments under schools, like the structure that they maintain, like you will find in other universities. I mean, not the private universities. But in some other universities like Ashoka or Azim Premji, you will find more focus on programs. And you will find at the end, I mean, most of these universities are focusing now not on master's program. We never know that whether MPhil program is taken away now, whether the master program will exist. We have no idea. You will find there is a focus, as a thrust on undergrad programs. There's the 4-year undergrad programs now. They have fine-tuned it with the NEP guidelines. Now you will find that like there are foundational courses which are interdisciplinary in nature, and there are majors which are more like disciplines like economics, mathematics, political science, history. You will find, and you will find also interdisciplinary majors. This is very interesting to see the structure. Interdisciplinary majors, you will find something like economics and history, English literature and media studies, English literature and performance studies, and likewise, you will find in the foundational courses, you will find something like economy, society, and polity. And this is very interesting to see how they make this difference between foundational courses from the interdisciplinary majors. And then there are minors. And this is again sort of disciplinary. So you will find some sort of a balancing. I would not say that, I mean, they are purely going with the interdisciplinary thrust. There are conventional departments, even though they don't really feature them as part of their, web pages. You will find, sociology departments, anthropology departments, sociology and anthropology departments. You will also find economics, history, political science. For example, in Azim Premji University, if you look at, there are departments of, like Department of History, Department of Economics. Then you will find a Department of Social Sciences. I mean, not Department of Social Sciences, programs like, undergrad program in history. I'm sorry, it's not departments. Undergrad programs in history, in economics, then an undergrad program in social sciences. So you will find some sort of a perfect balancing mechanism these universities are following. But on the other hand, if you look at practitioners, I think I don't mind saying that most of these private universities, those who are in the metropolis, for example, they employees at the assistant professor level, most of them are having white PhDs. You know what I mean by white PhDs. And if you have a white PhD, if you are in Europe or US, you are doing research, this rigid academic disciplinarity will be compromised in some sense, or otherwise, to be progressive, it is better to say that you are interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinarity becomes a signboard of, you are a progressive academic rather than, you are confined to the old, clutches of these disciplines. So most of these practitioners are exposed to interdisciplinarity, those who come from, having PhDs from Western universities. So that way you will find at the level of practice, there are signs of, how interdisciplinary is practiced. That also requires some sort of a research to understand, how interdisciplinarity is practiced. But at least you will find from their orientation of the faculty members who mostly join in private universities, they have this sort of an orientation and exposure to work with interdisciplinarity in some sense. But looking at the overall structure of these programs, you will find there is a fine balancing the private universities are doing. Always they will be catering to the demand of the market that you all know. How the restructuring will take place in another 10, 15 years. And always, one would ask this question, who are the people spending this much amount of money to the private universities to study a discipline like sociology or a discipline like history? It's a very interesting question when, scholars like Sarukai and Varghese wrote an article about, the crisis of social sciences in India in terms of funding, in terms of the desirability who want to go for social sciences. Usually, when you ask students, you will get to know that, those who migrated from engineering and other science disciplines to sociology. In JNU, we get students from engineering and sciences, then they shift to sociology. Most of them would say that, we have to fight with the parents. Nobody will permit you to do a degree that is not really fetch you good jobs. That's how I'm not really saying this. This is how the popular evaluation and perception about disciplines like, the hard discipline and soft discipline, these keep changing. But why private universities would have more and more social sciences and humanities disciplines? This is the question one needs to ask, and, it requires more research and observation on that, what's happening in future.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because we are confronted with a situation where public universities have been under attack and a lot of people are studying in private universities. And as you rightly say, they offer these programs which call themselves interdisciplinary. Last question, because we have read the book and we're discussing it and it's on interdisciplinarity. Do you think there is a crisis in interdisciplinarity? What would be your response to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Probably I'll start and Ratheesh can add.
Yeah.
If you are asking whether there is a crisis, I think the concept of interdisciplinarity itself is born with lots of crises. Inherent crises are there. But I think these crises are the characteristic of interdisciplinary studies also, because it's not a well settled kind of a person who is well settled and well protected and well in a comfortable stand, they may not be venturing for interdisciplinarity. This is like Robert Frost poetry, that there are two roads diverging and you will decide which road you want to take. And probably when you are taking an interdisciplinary path, there are lots of dilemmas and crises that you will confront. One major crisis is that, as I earlier told, gradually you will feel that your strength or your relative positioning and standing in your own parental discipline is getting weaker and weaker, because you are getting many other viewpoints and many ways of understanding reality is coming into your consideration. So it can happen that, or at most of the interdisciplinary practitioners at some point or other, they will have to hear this kind of blame that you are becoming more soft and you are lacking rigor in terms of analysis. For instance, a person who is trained in econometrics or economics, pure economics, when I am using media reports and clippings and stories and poetry in my articles, obviously the first question is that this person has lost rigor, because we are not we are not supposed to use these kinds of non-authentic material for creating an academic output. So, this major issue is that, like, from within your discipline itself, the first set of attack will come that, like, you are deviating from the disciplinary, desirable actions. So your behavioral change will be seriously noted, and you will have to face various kinds of punitive, whether it is subtle or whether it is visible. One has to go through that thing. And second important thing is that even when you are working in interdisciplinary schools, like as Ratheesh told, sometimes these are rehabilitation centers where the colleagues who are working on the topic or the area, they may not be fully owning that interdisciplinarity approach with them. So for instance, if you are working with a development studies school or a labor studies school, preferably a faculty member naturally will be claiming that I am a labor studies expert, or I am working on labor studies. But there are many instances where we can see faculty members describing themselves as, I'm a historian working on this particular labor studies, and Babu is an economist working on labor studies. Historian or economist, that kind of distinction won't matter when we are all working on labor studies. Or all the faculty members ideally in a development studies school should be experts on development studies. So this kind of owning the interdisciplinarity component is sometimes missing, and that may be because of certain kind of compulsions in the labor market also, because many of the people, they are into interdisciplinary works not only because of their interest but also because of certain kind of job market situations that that push them to come to that particular space. There may be, they can also visualize a situation that after some time they will be going back to their parental disciplines in a center where the economics is prominent. They have to go back. So they have to always establish as an economist also. When I wrote these particular books, my own contribution to this particular book, I thought many times before keeping a title for that article, that like the article's title is Once Upon a Time I Was an Economist. Before writing that title or finalizing that title, I was debating whether it will have certain kind of implications for me, whether the economist, my parental disciplinary colleagues, will they be accepting that thing? What is my explanation? Am I disowning or owning? Because these kinds of issues are there. And we can see these tensions at different layers also. In universities, normally when appointments are happening and promotions are happening, your disciplinary standing and contribution to your discipline is counted. I have attended many interviews where I was asked pure economics questions. And some of the interview board members known to me, they told that like, Babu, we know about your interdisciplinarity, labor, everything, but this is a position for economics professor. So can we discuss economics? And the moment we discuss economics, probably like because of my standing in labor studies, I may not be qualifying in that particular level where they want to consider a person of high standing for a particular position. I remember that whenever we are applying for funding agencies are normally they don't have this interdisciplinary stream. One of the postdoctoral applications for which I have applied, I remember that I selected a topic on labor studies, and I wrote that it is interdisciplinary study. The agency, they contacted me and told that we don't have any interdisciplinary stream, but from your biodata, we can understand that you are an economist. So can we put your studies into economics stream so that the interviewing persons may be from economics? So I didn't want to be put it as a economics thing, but I had to select one stream. So ultimately I had to select management studies. And you can imagine a situation where a labor studies proposal is being interviewed by management studies experts. So many a times your frameworks are rigid. Frameworks, they don't have space for interdisciplinary studies. You take for instance, universities like South Asian University. South Asian University, I am an economist. If I want to get into South Asian University, the position which is most suitable for me to apply is professor in economics. But I want to go into an interdisciplinary school within South Asian University where I can practice both economics as well as labor studies. But I can't find any space or a position in that particular university because the visualization of that university is done in a particular manner where like economics, sociology, like that, you have positions there. And probably these are all not things which will not be changing at all. Maybe gradually these kinds of structuring of universities can change. We can also see that journals or ICSSR or UGC or many other funding agencies support, everything is initially conceptualized in a disciplinary framework. So gradually the situation is changing, but to what extent? I am looking forward to a situation where more and more opportunities for jobs, funding, and publication, that also comes to interdisciplinary streams also. And we can also see that interdisciplinary projects are also very challenging. Suppose if you are working on economics or working with a framework of economics, it is very easy to navigate your research because the discipline has its own way of navigating. But when you are into an interdisciplinary stream, you yourself don't know which way you are progressing. Sometimes it may take more time than anticipated. Sometimes it will take immediate success or immediate output may not be there. Sometimes you may not be using an accepted kind of data or material or a way of analyzing for that particular research. So you have to have a flexible framework, an accommodative environment. All these things are very important for interdisciplinary research. And you all know that in most of the cases, all these elements are not present. Some elements are present, some elements are absent. So that itself is a kind of a crisis of interdisciplinarity. But I am sure that with more and more people attempting on interdisciplinary pathways, we can see that there will be new ways of understanding disciplines and practicing disciplines will get accepted in university spaces and other research institutions spaces. And that will be a kind of respite to those people who are struggling with interdisciplinary pursuit. And these interdisciplinary paths are more difficult for those people who are beginners. At some point of time, like when you are established, probably I can see that it is more rewarding also. Because you don't have to bother about your promotions. You don't have to bother about your getting established in the field when you are at a senior level. But at beginning level, so my own discussions when I discuss with youngsters, I used to tell them one thing very importantly, and that is one, because of I believe in that thing. Two, that is an easy way to navigate within the university spaces. That means be strong in your own disciplines when you are beginning. And naturally, you will become interdisciplinary. And this is a kind of, if you are strongly working on or with lots of enthusiasm, lots of commitment, if you are working on an interdisciplinary topic, and when you are getting more and more stronger in your own discipline, gradually you will become interdisciplinary. That's a natural process. And I believe in that particular way of becoming interdisciplinary. And I also find that that is one particular way through which younger people who want to become interdisciplinary can follow their academic career path, because in the initial levels, being in with their discipline is also a practical way of navigating. So, but it's also a very solid way of becoming interdisciplinary. I don't think that no one who has become a proper interdisciplinary person has skipped their his or her parental discipline. I remember one of the metaphors explained by Professor Rajan Gurukal in one of our interdisciplinary related discussions, where he has compared interdisciplinarity into the case of a aircraft which is taking off. In order to take off into the interdisciplinary space, you have to acquire momentum on the ground, that is in your own disciplinary space. So the best interdisciplinary person is the person who has become, who has matured in their own disciplinary phases enough so that they will find that they can also accommodate various other perspectives, and they can also broaden their way of understanding. And obviously, they will get lots of anchorage and lots of new ways of conceptualizing things if they have a stronger base in their own respective disciplines.
Right.
The last question, I hope shall I just add a couple of points and I won't
Yes.
take much time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, please.
I just wanted to make a point that Babu mentioned towards the end is about the question of maturity being in a discipline. Rather, I found where the center in which I teach now. This is the center called Center for the Study of Social Systems. We don't call it as most JNU centers are like that. It is not like Department of Sociology or Center for Sociology. It is Center for the Study of Social Systems, in which you will find this eclecticism of scholars. They are also part of other disciplines. We have anthropologists, psychologists, and all. But at the same time, when students they come for PhD or MPhil programs with some exciting off-track topics, generally some of us will ask this question that what is sociological in it? And I found sociology is one of the disciplines where sociology tends to give up spaces which are potential sociological spaces, I would say. I mean, anything that carries this idea of the social can be sociological. That's my understanding. So that way, I found sociology as a discipline, at least the centers in which I practice, and also you will find different sociologies. JNU sociology is different from Delhi School of Economic Sociology. You will find those kinds of variations of it. Depends on what kind of theories are anchored mostly and what kind of methodology they follow. You will find those binaries are always either embraced, otherwise, what you call discouraged. For example, between positivism and interpretivism, between quantitative sociology and qualitative sociology, you will also find these kind of, theoretical binaries. For example, the Marxian political economy versus the cultural politics of postmodernism, feminism, and post-structuralism. You will find a kind of a literariness attached to sociological research, which is not really encouraged by the positivist scholars. So you will find the subjective versus the objective. So you will find several binaries when we think about sociological theory, thinking, practicing approaches and methods, and so on and so forth. So can we reconcile these binaries, which were also part of ideological, institutional frameworks, which classical thinkers like Robert Merton challenged at that point of time? And he was talking about the bearing of method on theory, the bearing of theory on method, and vice versa, which I used to teach in most of my methodology courses, where you will find that how academic maturity comes being within the discipline. So say, for example, you will find certain parts are mostly denied or deleted. For example, when you teach classical theory, when we understand social reality, you will find a particular set of scholars or scholarships are preferred over others. Like, for example, now suddenly I'll find a move towards everyone wanted to teach W.E.B. Du Bois. Last couple of years, you will find this. And Du Bois was a sociologist, was never taught in South Asian universities. Likewise, you will also find George Simmel, for example. You will find Norbert Elias. So you will find certain theoretical schools. Say, for example, Stuart Hall was always understood to be a cultural studies scholar, where he taught in Open University, British Open University, for 20 years as a sociologist. So you will find within a discipline like sociology, these scholars are denied. And can we think of understanding social reality through the lenses that they provided? And likewise, you will also find domains which I mentioned earlier, like, for example, food, sports, sound. These are the areas I also focus on in my teaching and partly in my research. And these are new objects within sociology, which was undermined or which was not really explored. And most topics are in that way, they are interdisciplinary in nature. But then you need to acquire that kind of a maturity, not thinking about your discipline as some sort of a, patriotic feeling that, my discipline is something great. And I mean, that you will find in many, from all kinds of age group of practitioners, from undergrad students to senior professors will have this kind of, what you call the custodianship and protecting the boundaries of, this is what sociology is. Sociological means this. You can't really go here and there, border crossing is understood to be a crime. Stay within the mainstream. And these are part of the crisis, I would say that, I mean, these can be challenged only by students and youngsters, and for that, we need to take risk in the sense that, like Babu mentioned, you go for the interviews, you will listen to this kind of a question that, this is not proper sociology or proper economics. So this is the risk that people have to take. You have to afford to take whether I should take a risk or not. I could not take a risk because I always wanted to do a PhD in sports studies. I wanted to do a PhD on the cricketing cultures of Indian metropolitan small towns. But it was thoroughly discouraged by my own peers and well-wishers that, first of all, you will not get a supervisor. Nobody will supervise this work. Even if you get a supervisor, you will never get a job. So I have to confine, I mean, I was not really interested in sociology of education. But sociology of education also opened up some of my thoughts on, how classroom culture can be understood in a different way, how critical pedagogy can be part of your, not only your teaching career, but also part of your life. So some of those elements I brought in. Sociology of education was also a good avenue for me to think in an interdisciplinary fashion, because education is a discipline. I mean, it's not a discipline per se, it's an interdisciplinary domain. But there are crises which, I would say it in terms of, institutional settings, practices and structures, and also the custodians who will always say that, no, this is not your discipline, this is what you need to do. So a lot of policing happens. Policing is the term that, Aparna Devre mentioned, one of our contributors, when we had a discussion in Hyderabad. So a lot of policing happens within discipline. So that curbs to become matured within one's disciplines, what is not really there and how we can actually brought in. So these are my thoughts. And yeah, I think the crisis has to be taken at various levels. I mean, one's own, risk-taking possibilities, institutional settings, what you think about the future in this discipline. So it all depends upon which individuals address these crises. And it's important to address these crises.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar, for saying those things. I think they will resonate with a lot of young people who are listening and watching, because this is also our everyday struggle in a way. So again, thank you, Professor Ramesh and Dr. Kumar, for discussing the book with us. And I hope that our viewers are going to also pick up a copy and read it. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Deepali and Rituparna, for organizing this discussion. And personally, I really enjoyed this conversation. Also, I could, in between, I could think about, what are the issues which we could not take up and which we can take up further. So it also gave an opportunity to reflect upon things which we did, which we did not do. So it's a good conversation to think further on this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.